I'm representing a company called Teranomic. We are a local software development and professional services company. We have about 8 years of government technology experience. So I myself have been a former deputy state CIO for about 4 years. So I know quite a bit about state government in particular, having worked in that particular realm and reality. I have with me Wade Cowpers, and he is our Chief Operating Officer for Teranomic. Together we're going to talk to you about the security risks associated with social media. So welcome, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to come and hear us out. Since we have a small audience, we would like to make this somewhat interactive, so if you have any questions as we go through the presentation, feel free to raise your hands and we'll try to address as much of the questions and comments that you have as possible. Today's agenda is going to include a brief discussion about what is social media, how to essentially revamp the way that we communicate with our client base, the way that we stay in touch with our internal and external customers in that regard. Then we'll cover a little bit about some of the security tips that the industry has essentially evolved into. And as a part of that, we'll have a brief case study that I'll talk to you about in regards to social media policy preparedness and the training and the guidance that internal and external folks need in order for social media to maintain its effectiveness. Then we'll talk a little bit about what the security process is. It essentially overlaps in some respect with some of the traditional security procedures that we're used to in the information technology arena, but it does have some uniqueness to it in that as we develop more and more policies and operational scenarios associated with that, we'll discuss some of the procedures involved in that particular area. There are a lot of best practices evolving with regards to social media. There is no specific standards as we know it in the information technology arena, but a lot of evolutionary details are coming together, and hopefully there will be some standards adopted. Before I get into the specific details, I'm going to turn it over to Wade, who will briefly explain to us what social media is and how it impacts our business environment.
Good afternoon. How you guys doing? So I guess I basically assumed that you wouldn't be here if you didn't have a basic understanding of what social media was and how it functions. And for the most part today when we're discussing social media, we're talking about Twitter and Facebook. And these are basically the best messaging tools because for a long time we've recognize the fact that they connect very directly with the people who are trying to listen to you. So if someone follows you on Twitter or somebody friends you on Facebook, they want to know what you have to say. And this is a big part of the functionality of it as a messaging tool and a big part of why it is that we use it in various settings. So over the course of the last probably 5 or 6 years, social media has gone from just an easy way to give out blips and blurbs of information to people to becoming an entire messaging strategy in and of itself. Today, you can have a unique social media marketing campaign or communications campaign in order to get out, in the case of government, in order to get out the word on a certain program that you're trying to run, on a set of new regulations or rules that you're trying to implement, and how to get them out. And it's a great way to do it because the people who really want to know, again, they're listening, they're following you, they want to know, they want to communicate with you, and they want to have a dialogue. And so we found that it's a really great way to work all those things into your overall messaging strategy. So yeah, but I guess All right. And I guess it's really important to understand that the message itself be controlled, not simply all the various aspects of the security, but also the way that you message and what's being said and who is saying it. And so it's important that everyone knows the full range of people who are communicating on your Twitter or Facebook platform, who has control over those things, what they're saying. And it's important to have a strategy for that, to know ahead of time what you're going to say, when you're going to say it, how you're going to say it, on what platform, to whom. It's important if you're in charge of an organization to keep track of all the things that are being said by your organization. The easiest way to do this, I guess, is to just follow yourself with a personal Twitter account, assuming you have one, or friend yourself, your agency on Facebook, so you can know exactly what's being said. And from my perspective as a communications professional and someone who's worked with social media since 2008, one big mistake that a lot of people make is that they leave social media in the hands of tech people, where social media is actually a communications device. And it should be in the hands of communications people, or if you have a spokesman or something like that, the people who deal with the press, the people who deal with communications, because it's not just a tool for communicating to people, it's also essentially another press method. If you need to get out press about something, anybody can read it. So, excuse me, if a reporter wants to comment, they could just as easily look at your Twitter feed and find out what you said about something than calling you up on the phone and asking you a question. So all of those things are something to be aware of, in addition to all the hard security, cybersecurity aspects of social media. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Wade.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. So in terms of security scenarios, a lot of the components of security that we're used to with regards to overall technology as it relates to keeping, for example, a virus-free servers or desktops or smartphones, in terms of securing the networks and making sure that firewalls are used. A lot of the traditional security measures that we're used to also apply to social media, so I'm not going to necessarily preach the choir in that regard. Here are some examples of security measures that should be in place in order for social media to be an effective use in the context of protecting your asset base across your organization, but also ensuring of the confidentiality and privacy of the data that is exchanged with regards to your interactions with your clients. Some additional considerations with regards to security tips include, backing up the data so that in case there is some sort of a security breach, you're able to restore your environment and get back on track with your business. In terms of deviating from the traditional security aspects, a great example that I want to walk you through has to do with the major oil spill that we all should have heard about in one measure or another, related to British Petroleum. In that particular situation, BP was completely unprepared with regards to the ramifications of the public backlash with regards to the oil spill. And at that point, social media such as Twitter and Facebook were booming with regards to the customer interactions that could have been leveraged for BP to essentially contain the situation, reassure the local residents that measures were being taken to clean up that particular oil spill. However, BP in this particular case was completely unprepared. They had no social media strategy. They had no plans with regards to how they were going to essentially contain the backlash within the social media environment. And in that regard, it essentially damaged BP's reputation. Of course, the oil spill itself had a major impact on that, but as far as the containment of the situation and reassuring the folks that BP essentially provides products and services to, they could have leveraged social media as the means to really essentially bring folks on the same page about how they're going to remedy the situation. In that context, their reputation was damaged, and also their underlying valuation was significantly impacted because of the situation that cost them billions of dollars to essentially bring back in line. So in the examination of the situation, it was evident that they did not anticipate the impact that social media had on the proliferation of that particular situation. They did not have any policies with regards to what should be done, what messaging should be consolidated on social media in order to keep folks informed about the remedies that are being considered. And also at that point, an examination of the situation clearly indicated that there was no employee training with regards to how social media should be used, what kind of information should be passed on, and what kind of information essentially should not, in order to contain the situation. We will make the details of this particular case study available. There's quite a bit involved, but given the limited amount of time we have for the presentation, I'm just going to give you the very highlights of it, but we'll make that available on the website with the PowerPoint presentation. In terms of the actual security process that is recommended in the industry at this point, the first and foremost aspect of the situation is to understand your environment. You know, what is your business mission? What are you trying to essentially convey to your client base, to your internal and external customers? And in that context, an assessment of the alignment of your social media strategy with that of your underlying mission is part of the security process, because if your social media approach and the communication methods are not necessarily in line or in conflict with your underlying mission and corporate objectives or business objectives within government, then there are risks that essentially could engage folks that are responsible for social media to breach privacy or security type scenarios associated with your social media presence. After the assessment, there should be a sort of a measure in terms of the organizational impact, and with regards to that, I'm going to go into some additional details in a slide or two. As far as the assessment process, the recommendations are that you have a clear strategy defined for your entire organization with regards to social media. There are significant threats in terms of downloadable content that could essentially be brought within your infrastructure with social media interaction. So those threats should be analyzed and well understood in the overall context of performing your assessment. An examination of the operational policies and controls should essentially be a strong component of the security assessment process. And in that context, naturally the enforcement of those policies and control measures are absolute necessity, and that leads to the point of implementing monitoring and reporting tools as far as the use of social media and the nature of interactions that your staff and employees are essentially engaging in with your clients and internal and external customers. As far as the organizational impact, I touched a little bit about the overall IT security. So assuming that that aspect of your organizational scenario is intact, then really the main focus should be on the human resource aspect, making sure that folks are completely trained and up to speed with regards to the use of social media from a marketing and outreach standpoint. The messaging should be, as Wade indicated, should be consolidated and also proliferated across the organization so that there are no conflicts between how information is disseminated and displayed with that of the underlying mission and direction of the organization. With regards to some of the best practices, essentially the recommendations are quite deep and extensive in that particular area. We do have some literature in our brochure that you're welcome to take with you. related to some of the security risks and best practices that both government and private entities can essentially engage in. The majority of the best practices involve the human element of the use of social media and training them, having policies in place, and making sure that the messaging is consolidated across the organization. Some enterprise-wide considerations for the best practices associated with social media involves identification of what data can be essentially allowed for communication across the organization with regards to your communication with the clients, guidance and training to employees and public in regards to reputation management, and those are some of the significant aspects of best practices that are essentially within the industry being contemplated as standardized type scenarios for best practices in social media management. The notion of web apps are essentially becoming strong aspects of our organizational development. A lot of web apps are essentially subject to major security breaches with downloadable type communication on social media. And in that particular context, malicious code prevention techniques are available, and there are a number of products that in the literature that we're going to provide are available to organizations to essentially download or acquire for prevention of any particular breaches. That wraps up our presentation at this point. If you have any particular questions, we would like to entertain them.
What does Teranomic do? What is your...
We are a software development entity. We have a series of government-oriented products, such as an online licensing tool. We have a social media management tool that integrates, it's like an aggregator of a sort that essentially integrates all of your management capabilities across Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Those are some of the prominent capabilities that our corporation has. All right, thank you very much for attending. I know this was somewhat of a short session. There's some brochures here you're more than welcome to take with you. Go ahead and hand those out. And we appreciate your time.